you all for coming out to tonight's forum. Hopefully it will be an educational one for all of you. We want to remind you that this forum tonight will be rebroadcast on GTV2. They're going to be airing it. Are there certain things you ring the bell for? Like if I say The Ohio State University or GTV2? Did an angel get its wings? GTV2 will be airing tonight's Candidates Forum beginning tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. and will air it for the next 7 days at 3 and 5:30 p.m. GTV2 is Channel 2 on Warner Cable in Allen County. We do want to thank our sponsors tonight. Randy Payne from AEP Ohio. Randy, give us a wave here. Yeah, there you are. Okay, Kathy Daniels with CenturyLink. Okay, I didn't see Phil, but Kurt Nieper's in the back with Superior Federal Credit Union, and Brian Young with Time Warner Cable. Brian, thank you all for helping us out tonight, and of course The Ohio State University and Dr. Schneider for giving us this lovely facility to work from. Our rules tonight, so that we know how we're working. This is a regular media forum, so we have each media panel will ask questions. They will rotate turns asking questions of the candidates. Each candidate will rotate turns with questions asked from the panel. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions asked by the panel. We will have follow-up questions allowed. If there is a question that they feel they need to follow up with, the media can ask, and then the candidate will have 1 minute to respond to that. At the end, they will have a 3-minute closing statement summarizing why they are running for office and why they think they're the best candidate for it. I would like to introduce first our candidates this evening. On my far left, Donald Kissick, our Libertarian Party candidate. And you can applaud to start with. And then on my near left, Jim Jordan, our Republican congressman. And our third candidate, Democrat Doug Litt, could not make it tonight. He was invited. We want you to know he did say that he had some health concerns, and so he could not make it this evening, but he was invited. Our panelists this evening, we want to introduce them. Immediately on the left, Stuart Hall from your, what are we calling ourselves? Your hometown Lima station. You can applaud the media guy. Okay, Doug Jenkins from Clear Channel Communications. We have Ron Letterman in the back from the Lima News. And Clyde Clyburn, who will be our business representative tonight. All right, so let's begin the operation here. First off, our first question will come from Stuart Hall, and it will go to Congressman Jordan. Mr. Jordan, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, first of all, to both of you for taking this time out to meet with us this evening. Mr. Jordan, with our national debt in the trillions, the latest numbers say every American's share now somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000. That's not just taxpayers, that's every American. China holds much of our debt. What can Congress do, if anything, to restore America's economic leadership? What do you think that you could do as a congressman?
I mean, the answer is simple. Quit spending like crazy. And let me also, before we go, thank our sponsors for tonight's event, OSU Lyman, the League of Women Voters, and all of you for participating. And certainly, I know Don would share this with me as well. Our heart goes out to Mr. Litt, and we hope he has a speedy recovery from his health concerns. Quit spending. Look, I'm the only member of Congress to introduce a balanced budget. Our budget, we think, does the right things. It gets to balance because we go back to a 2008 baseline level of spending in non-defense discretionary spending, pre-bailout, pre-stimulus, pre-craziness in Washington. We go back to holding the line on spending. And here's the way the process works in Washington. It's why it's broken. It's why we have a $12 trillion national debt. It's why, if you saw the Journal piece today, in 2 years, we've had a 21.4% increase in spending over just the last 2 years. So we go back and say, look, instead of doing what the old system was, which is whatever you spend this year becomes the baseline for next year, and then it goes up, and then the next year, and it continues to grow, we say, let's go back and hold that baseline at 2008, before we started all the bailouts, before the so-called stimulus, before all the ridiculous things went on, and frankly do what American families, American taxpayers, American small business owners have had to do. Spend and live on what you were living on a few years ago. I mean, why is it that the rest of America has to do that, but somehow the federal government can't? And that's what our budget does. Now, we offered it as a substitute to the Obama budget. Last year, we got 111 votes. And if what's going to happen on Election Day is what I think is going to happen, we're going to get a lot more votes for that kind of measure next January, next spring when we offer our budget. So it's about spending. You know, you always hear tax and spend. It's not really, it's spend and tax. Spending drives the equation. Washington's problem is not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And the only way to do it is do what families, what taxpayers, what business owners had to do, hold the line on spending. I've been the only member of Congress to step forward and offer a plan that gets to balance, and we're going to continue to push and do that.
Mr. Kissick.
Well, Representative Jordan makes a lot of good points. Some other things we could do in addition to what he's recommended is more than half of the stimulus package has not been spent. We need to bring that back in and end the additional stimulus spending. That'd be one of the first things that Congress needs to do. Really, we need to stop worrying about baseline so much. We have to look at every department that that the federal government is spending in, and we must look at cuts everywhere. Nothing can be taken off the table if any effort is to be taken seriously on reducing the deficit, on going back to even possibly a surplus like we had 11, 12 years ago. But like I said, everything has to be under consideration. We can't pick and choose which projects, we can't pick and choose which agencies and departments are going to face cuts. Everything can be cut in some way, shape, or form. And it's not necessarily just blind cuts. There are so many operations that could be done more efficiently that aren't. There are so many services that could be privatized that the federal government has decided to take on just, if for no other reason than additional power in Washington. And a lot of it also has been re-election efforts by a lot of politicians in both major parties. The other side of it, we must drastically reduce taxes, because even at Bush tax cut level tax rates right now, it's still stifling our economy. It's a major player into why we're not recovering the way we should, the way the normal economic cycle tends to operate when you have recession and then you have recovery. That's why it's being stagnated. We need to, I say, go to a 10% flat tax across the board, personal income 10% above $10,000. It may create some immediate deficit problems, but once jobs begin to grow and there's more prosperity, we will see the tax revenue start to skyrocket after that initial dip.
Any follow-up question from the media? Mr. Jenkins.
Yes, for Mr. Jordan. If we go back to a baseline spending, can you just sort of outline how that begins to reduce the deficit? Obviously, that brings us back to an area that's not quite spending as much now, but how does that actually bring the deficit down then?
You gotta hold it, and you get to a balance in the out year. You get to a balance in year 9, and Mr. Kissick is exactly right, and we have this in our budget proposal. You should go grab the unspent stimulus dollars, apply that to bringing down the deficit, and frankly, what we really need long term to begin to pay down the debt, not just balance the budget and get rid of the deficits, the annual deficit, but begin to pay down the debt. You need economic growth. You got to have a growing economy, and you can't have a growing economy when Washington continues to scare the job creators, to scare the private sector, to scare the small business owner out there with all the uncertainty, with the tax increases that are hanging over people's heads, with the health care bill that no one yet fully understands, with the talk of doing cap and trade and everything else. So get rid of that uncertainty, get some economic growth, and couple that with what we're offering in our spending reductions. That's how you get to a balanced budget. That's how you get your economy growing again. That's how you make sure you keep America the #1 economy in the world.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Jenkins. We'll start with Mr. Kissick.
Okay. Probably goes without saying that neither of you are big fans of how the healthcare system has been implemented here recently. In a perfect world, what is your solution to American healthcare, and what is at least one step that can be taken towards moving in that direction?
Well, the first step obviously is going to be to repeal the Healthcare Reform Act that was passed earlier this year. It's a monstrosity that the American people do not want by a vast majority. And one of the best fixes is to actually employ the Commerce Clause as far as what constitutes minimum acceptable coverage state by state. The minimum coverage laws that each state passes actually interfere with people's ability to buy insurance, across state lines. Like here in Lima, if a business wants to buy insurance from someone that's set up in Fort Wayne, they cannot do that unless Indiana's minimum coverage is a little bit more fully loaded than what we have here in Ohio. I have to admit I don't understand how that law works. I don't know if you can do that anyways on the current setup. One of my favorite examples that I've cited throughout this campaign has been California. Their minimum coverage requirements for employer-based insurance are so insane they even require hair transplant surgery to be considered minimum basic insurable health coverage. You can't have a viable free market in that kind of environment. I mean, there are a lot of good ideas, a lot of ideas that are very popular, such as denying insurers the ability to, or preventing insurers from denying new customers coverage based on pre-existing health conditions. But even then, you don't want to make this an over-encompassing law as far as that prohibition goes, because some people may wait until they have insurance before they finally get a health matter taken care of. There's a lot of avenues for abuse and fraud on that front. It needs a lot of careful coverage. Those are two things that will help, because too many people get denied the ability to do preventative care before they have a catastrophic health problem. And that's a very complex issue that requires a lot of analysis.
Mr. Jordan?
Well, Mr. Kissick is exactly right. Step one is to repeal this piece of legislation. I mean, think about it. For the first time in American history, the federal government says you as an American citizen have to purchase a product, and if you don't, you could face a fine and all kinds of penalties. So this bill is wrong. American people understand it. That's why over 60% of Americans weren't in favor of its passage, and why it's still, the majority of Americans are opposed to it. And then you do the things that we've talked about. I co-sponsored legislation which said encourage health savings accounts. You have to get price back into the decision-making process in healthcare. One way to encourage that is through health savings accounts. You have real tort reform, real litigation reform is important. You treat families who have to purchase insurance. You give them the same tax benefits we give to employers who offer it to their employees, and you do allow the purchase across state lines. That's how you have to go. Fundamentally, this bill, Americans don't like it because Americans fundamentally don't like the federal government telling them what to do. I mean, that's just part of being an American. And here comes the federal government with a 3,000-page bill and all the bureaucrats in Washington saying, we're going to get between you and your family and you and your doctor. And Americans don't like that. So step one is to repeal it. We'll see what the president does. I think we're going to have the numbers to do that. My guess is he'll veto it, and then we're going to have a fight over the individual sections of the bill. My guess is how that plays out next Congress.
Okay, any follow-up questions? Mr. Letterman? On switch is on the bottom.
Sorry. Thank you. Particularly for Mr. Jordan, but Mr. Kissick as well. Mr. Jordan, you mentioned that you think Congress will repeal the law. I want to know specifically, I'm guessing in your case you would, but how both of you would vote on that effort. First question, I'm going to have another one follow up.
So the specific question is how I would vote on repealing healthcare. Well, I'd vote yes. We should repeal it. We should do it. It should be one of the very first things Congress does when the new Congress is sworn in January. It's the wrong approach. We understand that, and we should repeal it.
I would vote to repeal as well. I wouldn't even hesitate. There's no doubt in my mind that repealing it is the most important first step.